Greetings all. Let's get it started here. We have a very mystically oriented show this week. I want to welcome everybody on this Saturday Innerstanding, where we meditate, elevate, and recalibrate the inner verse to deal with the outer world, right? Today is part two of the science of vibes and frequency. Some of you joined us last week, and who knows, we might have part 3 or 4 or maybe more, coming up. But let's see what happens today and what we get through. And I want to first thank you all for your frequency and supporting the show by just showing up here today. And I send out a big, warm, metaphysical hug to all of you. Allow yourself space in those auras today as we take a journey and a venture into perhaps a lot of new information and a lot of new ways of thinking about sound and frequency and vibration and how it pertains to our lives. Don't hesitate to share out during the discussion. And let's get started. Lao Tzu, the Chinese mystic and original teacher of Taoism, said, "Be mindful of your thoughts, they become your words. Be mindful of your words, they become your actions." Right? Well, let's add to this proverb, be mindful of your words, they carry your frequencies. Right? In other words, when we attach meaning to our frequencies, they become our destiny. And that's essentially what seems like Lao Tzu was telling us there thousands of years ago. And what are frequencies? Well, if we recap from last week, we took our initial dive into the topic and framed it in a certain way where we understood frequencies in terms of vibrations. Tesla himself said that if you want to understand the universe, think energy, frequency, and vibration. We clarified last week and began to make some connections with the frequencies associated with our health and our auric fields, right? So we're going to take a deeper dive this week and begin by raising our own frequency, as we always do with our own meditation and conscious breathing exercise of the day, diaphragmatically taking that nice deep inhale through the nose, nothing to where it's too loud or too forceful, but just becoming conscious of that breath. Whatever you're doing, you're invoking right now, that moment of being present. Let's all do this collectively together so that we are metaphysically in the same place, really. Beginning with the emotion of gratitude, just have that thought for yourself today of wow, isn't it incredible and miraculous and so right and good that I'm alive today. I can use my own faculties, my own limbs, my own mental faculties to create the type of day that I want to have, to breathe and speak freely on another day on planet Earth. And as you breathe consciously through the nose, allow some of these thoughts of gratitude to take shape in the heart center, right? Slow that breath down, bringing it down from the nose to the navel. No matter what you're up to at this point, even if you're moving, attach the breath to the movement or attach it to the stillness that you find in your present reality right now. Each conscious breath, it was said, I believe it was Swami Rama said that each conscious breath that we take it stands time still. It actually, you don't age in that moment when you take a conscious breath. And taking that full conscious breath all the way down, picture it going all the way down to the toes, to the feet. You're breathing through the whole auric field, This is real pranayama. This is real conscious breathing. When you're embodying that breath and consciously bringing it down to the tips of your toes, filling up the body with energy. As you breathe, you're not only breathing in air, but you're breathing in energetic force, life force, prana, that's all around you. Magically, or not magically, however you want to view it, it's there for us to access, and it is everywhere around us in that force field that surrounds us. Slowing that breath down and being grateful is where I think any good practice, any good meditative conscious practice begins, right? Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to incorporate mantra, and we're going to tie in some things to the frequencies here today. So I'm glad that you're able to breathe with me, if not anything else, and have this moment here. Let's go into the second and pretend for a moment that you are at a summer festival, right? Hopefully you get to one of those this summer, or a couple. There are thousands of people walking around, bumping into you, right? Like ants. We're at this festival and we're walking around and kind of just bumping into faces, like ants bumping into one another, and then we just keep moving. It seems so random, right? And we never know who we're going to bump into next. The reality is that we are bumping into and especially talking with people that were brought to us through a frequency, right? Through a match of a frequency in our auric field. While it seems that this event is so random and we're just running into people that they didn't know they were going to run into us, and we didn't know we were going to see a new face. Sometimes we see an old familiar face in a crowd of 1,000, and that's no coincidence either. It's the same thing at a beach, where I was just at a crowded beach and I was sitting there pondering. We have more chance of striking up a conversation with someone a mile down the beach if they have a common energetic frequency with us than we do having a conversation with someone sitting right next to us. We could be sitting next to somebody on a beach for 4 hours and not have a conversation with them if we're not matching any sort of frequency with them, right? So it's fascinating. This world of frequency completely calls into question our social reality and what we believe about our social reality on many levels, if you think about it. Aura is the energetic and causal field that is surrounding the human body of each one of us. It animates our physical body. And these auras hold endless amounts of information, everybody. And there's a reason why they call it the causal field. We're talking about metaphysics today. These auras are vaults, if you will, of our intuition. And they are the keepers of our extrasensory perception. Telepathy, clairvoyance, clairsentience. Specifically, the physical body is surrounded by an oval-shaped egg, if you will, made up of 7 layers of these auric fields. And the egg is actually, almost like a cocoon around us, but it's always shifting and shaping into different forms depending on our mood, our environment, etc., right? So these layers, when in balance, they are harmonically related. We were talking about harmonics last week, and the ideal frequencies that are within each one of these auras are those that are harmonic with each other or constructed in patterns of completion. Right? So we said last week that when we're not when we haven't experienced completion in a certain aspect of our life, especially our emotional, our mental lives, let's say we're getting over a certain trauma, or we have someone in our lives that we can't get along with, or we haven't forgiven, things like this. This is an incompletion. And this incompletion shows up in a static sort of pattern in our auric field, and it remains there until we deal with it, right? A lot of times these things that become static in our auric fields, since they are in the causal body, they begin in the auric field, but then they complete themselves, or they find themselves in the physical body, and they show up in some sort of malady or chronic illness. So that's why they call this the causal body, because it starts here first. And that's why the patterns that have to be constructed in the aura are harmonic when they are completed. When there's completed patterns in each aura, there's an even flow of energy in and out, to and from the aura, right? So each layer of the field, of the auric fields, and we'll talk about them in a second, but they intertwine and they interact with one another, right? And each layer has its own unique frequency or rate of resonance, if you will, getting less dense as you move away from the physical body, if that makes sense. So we're resonating outside of the physical body. There are 7 bands, just like there are 7 major chakras going up and down the spine. There's 7 bands of the auric fields that can be divided into 2 planes. They call the one plane the causal plane, and the other one is the spiritual plane. The causal is closer to the body. But really the key number here is 3, right? We have 3 layers, and then we have a bridge, which is the middle one, and then we have 3 more layers, which is the spiritual. So we have 3 causal and 3 spiritual, and one in the middle. That one in the middle we call the astral. Okay, this is the astral field. And it's kind of like it's the bridge, it's the communicator between the two. And the really interesting thing about the astral field is that that's where, when we begin conscious breathing, that's where the conscious breath is felt first. When we breathe and we visualize the breath in conscious form, in our aura, it goes right and it influences the astral field first, because that astral field then connects the spiritual with the physical, right? It's causal. It connects everything. It brings everything together. So those of you who have kind of dabbled into metaphysics or studied sacred anatomy or things related, alchemy, you'll recognize that 3 is a number of balance, right? It nullifies the effect of duality. We are smack dab in the middle of a dualistic world, the culture, whatever you want to call it, reality. I mean, we see it every day, all day, right? Us versus them. Choose one side, choose the other. Vote for him or vote for him. So the importance of the number 3 is essential, everybody, because it breaks up that duality and it gives us balance, and it shows us that really the duality is an illusion. And 3 then leads to 1, and oneness is the beginning of all and the end of all, right? Numerologically speaking. So a chair, for example, right? A chair can't stand with 2 legs and will fall over. But with the third leg, it shall stand, right? Just to put it into kind of daily terms here. So these fields, we're talking about the auric fields, they're each resonating at a different octave. And that octave, when in accordance with the one underneath it or above it or outside of it, creates the harmony or the disharmony in the system. And when the fields are harmonious, there are clear colors that are seen on a metaphysical, on a very ethereal level. We can't see the colors quite with our, in our everyday interactions, although some people they're resonating at that place where they could see people's aura. They may even be able to pick out some of the colors. I had an instance one time in a forest where I saw auras, and it's another story. But anyway, the auras emit these patterns and their frequencies. And the three causal planes that we're talking about that are closer to the body are composed of what we call the etheric body, the emotional body, and the mental body. So our mental and emotional and our etheric body are outside of the body first. Our thoughts begin outside of the body, everybody. They don't begin in the brain, according to these principles of Plutonian metaphysics, if you will, right? Esoteric thought. This goes back to spirit science, ancient Vedic and Kemetic knowledge. So then there's the astral body, which is the in-between, that bridge that we were talking about. And that bridge leads us to the spiritual level of the auric fields, which are the next three layers. So when we meditate or do yoga or kriya or pranayama or certain conscious breathing techniques, we directly activate that astral body to connect to the spiritual realm. So the three spiritual levels after the astral allow us access, and listen to this, they allow us access to all that was ever known by any human being. I'll say that one more time. The spiritual levels outside of the astral plane, outside of the astral level, those three fields allow us access to all that was ever known by any human being. This is called the Akashic record, all right? And maybe some of you may have, this might ring a bell for some of you. And that Akashic record is the gateway to really collective consciousness and the one consciousness that we're all connected to at that point. We're able to access that place. That, not that we do, certainly on a daily basis. We will when we pass away, in theory, but it is there. It is there. So these three layers that are in that spiritual realm are the etheric body, the celestial body, and the ketheric body. The celestial body is that body where the Akashic record is located. And then the ketheric body is the merging with all of consciousness. That's what ketheric means. It means merging with all of the rest of consciousness. It literally is connected to us through frequency. We seem so small and minuscule, and we get bogged down in our thoughts and our distractions. Little do we realize that we need to start exercising our minds to go into these realms more, to break ourselves out of these patterns of emotional static, right? We all have access. A final and enduring point here is that each layer of the auric field is a body just as real, and if not more alive, I would say, than the physical body. And we humans are designed with precision, reflecting the nature of the universe and embodying the sacred principles of mathematics, geometry, alchemy, which are some of the areas we're going to touch upon today in a more kind of mystically fashioned historical show as well. We're going to kind of mix it all up here today. So the problem is, if there is a problem, is that most of us are not aware that we have these fields, right? We're talking about massive amounts of people here that we just don't know that they exist. And if we are aware of them, our everyday lives and our culture don't support our exploring them, right? We're not really rewarded from exploring the awareness that takes place within them. So while certain esoteric traditions of the Western, let's say, of the Western sort, recognize these fields through Plutonian science, etc., mainly ancient Greek and Latin, and some occult, we would say, type histories, that have been passed on through the ages, they're not given any attention in modern Western medicine at all. If you start talking about the auric fields, so you can ask your doctor how your medication is affecting your auric fields, right? But he or she is going to most likely just stare at you as if you just stepped off of a spaceship. unfortunately. And I'm sure some of us have had some interesting conversations with our doctor. By the way, everyone, the average American spends less than 15 minutes per year speaking with their doctor, with their primary care doctor. I just read that statistic the other day. It was fascinating to me. So anyway, you only have 15 minutes with the doctor. You're going to bring up the auric fields. You're wasting your time. So speaking of stepping off of spaceships and planets and things along the celestial path here, the Earth carries its own auric body as well. Okay? We call it the atmosphere, but the Earth also has, and all the planets have this auric field as well. Every being in existence has the auric field. Every being, physical being, if you will, in this universe, on this plane, has an auric being as well. That's an extension of it. Moving on, we need not get into a blame game about anything, but instead change our own behavior, I feel, so that we'll be able to be more aware of these fields. And the biggest change we can make is to start feeding the etheric body, right? To start feeding our auric fields and not just the physical body. I think that's the number one thing that keeps us kind of in this matrix, this dominatrix, where we're just all physical. Everything is just physical, 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 because we just feed the physical body. Our mental exercises focus on the physical. We need to have these conversations with each other about the ethereal, about the existence of beyond the physical body. When we only feed the physical, it becomes gross. It creates blockages or static in the aura. And so our auric fields, some of them are cleaner than others, right? Some of them are more harmonic than others based on how we take care of ourselves. How do we feed the auric fields? First, I would say, conscious breathing and visualization techniques that bring life and awareness of these fields. So we have to show ourselves that they exist. How do we show ourselves? Well, we picture them. That's the beauty of the imagination, is there's nothing imaginary about it. We have to create the image in our mind. Once we create it, we access it. It's already there. But we have to allow ourselves to see it and to experience it, so that on our conscious minds, we're able to be convinced that it exists. It's like doing a handstand. Well, you never feel like you can do one until you actually stand up there for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then you've convinced yourself that you can actually maybe do it, right? So, yes, visualizing and breathing while you visualize these auric fields around you, creating that cocoon around you, that cocoon of light, when in your meditations, will actually breathe life into the auric field, because it's there already. So we want these fields to emerge in our consciousness. Number 2, I would say conscious movement, such as yoga or Tai Chi or Capoeira Angola. All right, things where the body is moving in a very present-minded fashion and the breath is aligned with the body in a meditative way while you're moving consciously. There are movements in of course, yoga and capoeira and tai chi and qigong that are specifically oriented towards strengthening the auric fields, towards balancing them. The Jinga and Capoeira Angola is specifically for cleaning out the auric fields, right, and expanding them. Number 3, I would say mantra, and we're going to talk a little bit about mantra today. I believe we're going to get to it near the end. Mantra, of course, is the sound, the conscious sound, the meaningful sounds that we make that are hummed from the diaphragm. Those sounds are either affirmations, maybe in our own language, in English, or most likely they are from Sanskrit, and they are purposely created to increase frequency. Number 4, I would say loving exchanges with the self and other beings. Loving exchanges with the self and other beings. Creating that emotional connection with somebody or something. The hug, the 6-second hug, right? Instead of just giving somebody a quick kiss goodbye or a quick half hug, give them a nice long 6 seconds, 7 seconds where hearts can connect. And this is a great way to increase the frequency, the vibration. Holding hands, telling someone you love them, right? Finally, number 5, I would say, to increase the awareness of the auric fields is to laugh. Authentically laugh. Have fun. Look at something. Laugh at yourself. I can't do it enough. Even you know, I'll even watch a couple of comical videos and bloopers, whatever it is to get that laughter out. It's difficult to laugh in the world today. We know that. We're all having a difficult time finding some things to laugh about, but in the end, it's really all a big joke. It has to be a big joke. You know, when you get to the point where it's so serious, we have to look at it all as a game. It's just a dream within a game, within a joke, within a fantasy, and the laughing of it all is really the conquering of it all. So laughter is always a great way to defeat your enemies as well, right? So like the mouth opens when we laugh, the fields open as well, I would say. Okay? So energy has to flow to these auric fields, you know, for us to be aware of them. That's the thing. We can't be always feeding the physical, and we can't be always in the mire of our physical awareness and our emotional static. We have to pull ourselves out. We have to pull ourselves out with purpose. And then we can start to sense them in others as well. Once we're able to tap into our own auric fields, we'll be able to know better whether somebody is good to be around us or not. We'll be able to know more intuitively about certain decisions that we're making, especially when it involves other people, because you're going to be able to sense them on a better level, right? By the way, everybody, if you're just jumping on the show, we're going to take a moment and have a discussion here in a second. But any questions or comments about the auric fields, you can think of anything now that you'd like to ask or bring up, any experiences while you're thinking of something. The field of YouTube is where you can find this week's show and every broadcast of the show. If you would like to subscribe, that would be great. That'd be a great bonus. This is nonprofit faith-based work, and the organization is called Intertechnology. And the purpose is to facilitate higher human frequency here on Earth by providing us with the tools to become sovereign beings, right? To be capable of our own healing. Now, more than ever, I'm sure you all could agree on a certain level, we need this. We need this human connection. We need this human awareness. We need to understand just how powerful we are. Anyway, that YouTube channel is Intertechnology 7149. I believe that number comes up. And my personal email is techseca23@gmail.com, TECHSECA23@gmail.com. Moving on, would anyone want to bring up any experience that they've had with the auric fields or anything they'd like to add on, conversationally speaking? Love to hear from any of you. It's not one of those things that we think about much, and it's probably not one of those things that we consciously experience much. So I know we're not going to have a lot of takers with this one right away.
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Absolutely.
From my experiences in terms of auric fields, and not just my own, but just understanding that we all have them, in that I've learned both from what I've read and what I've experienced that there are certain people, groups of people that I am very comfortable being around, and I feel like I'm at home. And then there are those that I'm like, oh no, get me out of here. Let me take care of what I need to do, and then I'm out. I'm away because their fields have such uh, an opposing energy to them.
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Ali. And I'm glad you used the word opposing, because doesn't it seem like, yeah, the fields can actually repel as well too. I haven't dived too far into that, but the fields are like bodies themselves. If our physical body can repel somebody or resist somebody, then our auric fields, I'm sure, have the same capabilities. Where we just like, hey, two people decide, hey, we're really not compatible here energetically, and the fields just probably block up and repel. I would say it happens for sure. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody have any questions maybe they're floating around? I can attempt to answer them. All right. So just a fascinating and literally an endless topic to explore. Not like you can find a lot on the internet about these auric fields. There are some great pieces and great authors, of course, out there that have written esoteric. We're going to put some here we go on mute. Anyway, there's some great writings, um, esoteric writings about the auric fields that are out there. You're not going to find a lot of that's posted on the internet that gives you much more than what they actually are by definition. But the knowledge is out there. If you're interested in some authors and some scope of knowledge that really talks about these fields, send me an email and I'd be happy to guide you towards maybe somebody that you'd enjoy reading. But there is some accessible information out there. Moving on from the energy body to another area of frequency, if you will, that's more immediate, perhaps. Let's talk about the sounds that we use through words that we choose. Right? And everyone, I just want to put this reminder out there that I am not holding an absolute benchmark for everyone to achieve this pinnacle of perfection in their frequency and their mind and their soul, and cause any feelings of inadequacy out there because you're not doing the things that create high frequency, of course. Of everything that I suggest or comment, I want you to meet yourself where you are. If you're just becoming aware that these fields exist, then that's where you are in your journey, and it's a wonderful place to be. I'm simply reminding us that we are indeed very powerful and already perfect and have the full capacity to employ our superpowers as human beings. And in this show and the Temple of Intertechnology are dedicated to giving back the power to the mental, the social, emotional dynamic, and the creative seed in the genesis of every human being to find their truth and their sovereignty. Instead of corporations or AI or digital technology providing direction or fulfilling human needs, we are stepping forward here in our own power. As the late, great Jill Scott Heron said, the revolution will not be advertised on YouTube or something of the sort, right? It'll be within each one and every one of us. So we are the sovereign beings that we've been waiting for here. We are the healers. We are the emperors, the warriors, the tillers of the earth, the alchemists, the shamans, the priestesses, the astrologers, all of it, right? The metal workers, whatever our work is, we are the masters of that work. All right, getting back to the topic at hand. Now, the next subject kind of needs to be brought up in a sense that And I know I'll take some heat for it probably because I have in the past when I bring it up, depending on who's with me, but it's all good. I'm here to bring the heat. Otherwise, nothing gets cooked, right? So let me start out with a quote here and bring this through. Not quite in the Lao Tzu category, but I think you'll resonate with the quote. It's about cursing. I used to tell my students a lot, I still do. When you curse yourself first. And that is to say that, yes, we are literally putting a curse on ourselves when we use certain words. And sometimes those words may be different than what you would expect. And that's what the talk here is going to be about. I try not to curse, not because I don't want to be unethical, but because I don't want to create that frequency within my aura and in my life. Right? It's not about good or bad words. The words that we use is about the consequences of the energetic output that's occurring. So I attract the words that I constantly say. And even if my name has a certain meaning, by saying that name, I invoke a reality over time. So our name is very important, for example, as far as words that we say a lot. So our next segment here is not about cursing, but it's about the intention and the actions in our words. And we will continue talking about the aura and the laws of intention, or what some call the law of attraction, within the context of that, maybe into next week. But for now, let's begin with the solar plexus. Why the solar plexus? This crucially important area that is found in the belly of the human body, energetically, if you will. Why is it important and essential to understand this core area? It's really at the base of what the Chinese call the Tantien. It's the root of it's the source of our life force, if you will, in the body. If you have to bring strength, you have to bring life, vitality into your system, you bring it from this core area. So everything that we want to do starts in our solar plexus. Every action, every voluntary action begins with this life force principle that is born in the plexus. It's our inner star, if you will. Right? It's also the place where the fire lives within us. When you talk about the elements of earth, air, water, fire, and ether, this is where the fire lives. This is where the gastric juices, the acids that digest our food exist. So it's a very pertinent area. This is the home of our intention as well, metaphysically. This is where our intentions begin, our will intention. So our will energetically takes form and moves up the spine from the solar plexus and up the chakra column and meets the home of emotion. Where does it meet the home of emotion? Well, in the human heart center, right, which is the next chakra above it. So that's where we take that voluntary action that we have that's emerging from the solar plexus, like something I'm about to do, something I choose that I want to do. I want to go jump in the ocean, for example, right? I want to get off my towel and jump in the pool. It begins in the solar plexus, the energy for it, after the thought, of course. And so after it moves into the heart center, we find whether or not we're doing this from a place of desperation, or we're doing it out of fear, or we're doing it out of love or courage or the need to cool off, right? It kind of starts to take form. And this is when it metaphysically connects to one of the cranial nerves called the vagus nerve, very important cranial nerve, which then sends an instantaneous signal to the brain, where the action is regulated hormonally and kinesthetically. So then our brain gets ready to emit the proper hormones and chemicals that we need for the action. So if we're choosing to speak to this action, let's say we're choosing to say something instead of getting up and jumping in the pool, then this all takes shape and the final form of vibration in our throat chakra, in our Vishuddhu, where we configure a vibration that completes the whole of the will intention. So the will intention begins in the solar plexus, and if we want to speak it, it comes out of the throat. But it has to pass through the heart first. And in the heart is where it takes its emotional form. Right? What is the intent? Is it fear-based? Is it love-based? So this process essentially is what the universe reads energetically when we say something or when we do something. This is the universe responds to this. You could say the universe or Mahat or God or any other greater force that would like to, respond to this action. The universe reads all of it. And the universe returns back to us energetically the intention that we created from that whole process that was created in the solar plexus and passed into the heart. The universe gives us back energetically the intention that we put out there. That's the language that the universe speaks. And the intention goes into our aura first, right, the causal body. And it may not be accessible. It may not appear for a couple of days, at least consciously for us, even weeks later, depending on the frequency of the aura. And so this is what some people call karma. But I would surmise that it's not actually karma, it's the law of intention. All right, so it's about intentionality. Deepak Chopra wrote a great book called The Law of Intentionality, if you're interested in learning more about this. But the area of the process we're going to focus on is the throat chakra and the word, right? Where that will takes its form as far as words and sounds go. The sound of our actions, right? It'd be fun to talk about this in terms of music, but I'm not really well versed in that area. I have a friend or two in mind that might visit the show in a couple of weeks that could get into that. But for now, we're just going to talk about the words that we use, and specifically, we're going to talk about the English language. Okay? We're going to talk about etymology and the English language. And some of you might say, oh my goodness, I don't know if I want to go down this rabbit hole. But if you think about the importance of knowing and truly understanding what we're saying every day. Right now, I'm just talking, right? I'm rambling. I'm just saying words. I'm creating a vibration, a will intention, and then I'm putting it out there in the universe. Everything that we say every day, all day, is energetically projected into the universe and then projected back to us to create our reality. So think about how significant the English sounds, the English language the sounds that we're making, and the origin of these sounds, and what they actually mean, the intention behind them. Think about how monumentally important that is, right? If the universe is reading the intention of sounds that were created, and we are simply mimicking the sounds we've been taught, then wouldn't we want to know where those sounds came from or what their original intentions were when they were created, right? If I say the word pink, just looking on the screen right now, I say the word pink, right? We all conjure up the color pink in our mind. But why is that color that we conjure up in our mind, why does it have to sound like pink? Why can't it sound like aduka or something else? Any other sound, okay? So let's talk about the etymology or the origin of words in English and perhaps in other realms. And the one thing I observe, and maybe some of you can relate to this, as I get wiser, try not to say as I get older, as I get wiser, I become more fascinated with sound and language and its healing capabilities, and looking to even things like the pyramids that were used perhaps, for multi-purpose dynamics and dimensions and reasons, but they were also chambers where sound was created to project or broadcast or heal or whatever the intention was. But there's a clear indication there that the pyramids themselves were created as sound chambers, and as resonance devices, maybe instruments, if you will. Okay, so speaking of pyramids, let's take a little mini historical journey here, if you will, to find out some important things. And let me get situated, if you don't mind. I had to plug in my computer for a second there. All right. So let's find out some important things about the English language and how it is different than what we speak here in America in 2024, the original English language. Can I get a check that I'm being heard right now? I did made a little transition in the room. Could anyone just give me a thumbs up or give me an okay to make sure that I'm coming through on the other side?
I hear you.
All right, wonderful. Great. All right, by all accounts, the real English language, everybody, would be hardly recognizable to us. Although I'm not going to bore us with the whole history of why this is, I'm going to speak a little bit about it and why it's important insofar as we're using the words and do not know a lot of their origins and therefore the true intentional meaning and therefore their frequency. Words are being thrown into our periphery and they become buzzwords, right, from the media. And these words have power. They have great power of almost co-opting whole societies and cultures. Everyone starts saying certain words, and once they come up or they become buzzwords, and not knowing what on earth we're putting out into the universe. What are we putting out there into that's coming back into our auric fields from saying these words? Quarantine, for example, right? That's a big one that we've heard in the last 4 years. Quarantine, for example, is a Latin word that's been thrown around a lot since the pandemic and even before then. When we take a look at the word quarantine, if some of you maybe remember some of your Latin numbers, quarantine refers to the number 40, quarenta, right? Quar. To be exact, the etymology refers it back to the 40 days that Christ fasted and spent in solitude. This is the origin of this word. So why do we get put into a quarantine instead of isolation or something else, right? Why was this word chosen as something that might occur or did occur when we were experiencing COVID a couple of years back, right? Why do the authorities, if you will, choose this word? Man, why does the medical industry choose this word? Well, I don't know for sure. I'm not saying that I know the exact answer, especially about something like this. But if you sit with it for a while, I'd bet that the original intention of the word had to do with fasting, right, and isolation when it was created, if it referred to this act of Christ. And so my point is that we have to know these words that are used consistently, and every word has a distinct resonance. And in that, and the power in knowing the frequency is sometimes a great asset or advantage to us. So if the word quarantine was created out of a reference to the life or the fasting of Christ for 40 days, why does putting a group or of people or a country or a nation under isolation, why is it referred to as quarantine? It's just an interesting thing to think about, right? Does it mean that, what we're putting out there, that 40 days is obviously important for something? Are we going to be fasting for 40 days, eventually? But my point is that the intention of the word that was created is the one that the universe reads back to us and sends back to us. I'll give some more examples down the road here. So we're already really exposed a lot to music and media that's being purposely broadcasted to create vibrations, as a mass society, if you will. There's a lot there, and back to the English language, when we come to find, we're going to find that the English language in its original form was a true language, but eventually it has kind of become more of a program, if you will. And this is, based off of theory and my own theory, kind of merged with others and fused with others. I'll give you some sources of this in a second, but let's talk about some things that are not taught in our history classes to our young people, and certainly probably weren't taught to us. And you can check on some of this stuff, but here's some history we don't know much about, but I'm sure you'll agree that it's kind of fascinating in a way, very relevant. The version of English that was spoken in America and even in England since the Middle Ages has kind of morphed very much from the original language. There are, of course, a lot of definitions of language when we talk about what a language is. And there's a simple definition, such as sounds with meaning, or you can give a complex one, such as from Chomsky, who said that language is a linguistic computation that naturally evolved and is mirrored through culture. Well, I'm going to contend that the English that we're speaking may have a part that was naturally evolved, but it also has a part of it that was greatly manipulated in a very unnatural way. And because of that manipulation, it lacks a lot of intentionality when we speak it. The intentionality is missing, or the intentionality that we're projecting out into the world is different from when that word was created. And I think this is a major issue that really isn't talked about enough. So let's call the American English that we speak today kind of a genetically modified English that was gradually altered as the global economy and the power structure changed in the past centuries. How could we prove something like this? Well, quite frankly, I would start with the lack of consistent technique and method that create patterns of speech that make a language artistic or even scientific. And some of you may work with, I'm looking at some of the people here that are with us, some of you that work with languages may be able to either dispute this or refute this or support it or speak to it at some point. But first, when we look at ancient root languages, whether they be Bantu or Kemetic or Indo-European languages, Indo-Aryan languages, right, such as Latin or Greek, or if we look to the Eastern languages, Chinese, Amharic from Ethiopia, they all evolved naturally through geographic and cultural circumstances, and they all possess a method that reflects patterns of speech where words are built from sounds, and those sounds have meaning. The more patterns, the more meaning, and the greater intentionality. And of course, all root words are, you can add suffixes and prefixes to root words, and that's how words and meaning are built. Why does this happen? Why is this intentionality important? Because the universe responds to patterns. We know that the universe responds to patterns because it's made of patterns. We're made of patterns. The flower of life, right? The universe is patterns. Intentionality comes from the feeling behind the words, and the patterns are created in that intentionality. So a language evolves naturally through emotions and experiences of its people, we would say, right? That's a natural evolution of language. Most languages have an exact, consistent method or a structure that reflects the root words and the sounds and these reliable patterns. Does our language have this? Yes. But it also has a lot of disconnected and meaningless sounds that are not attached to anything as far as consistency. It's kind of scientifically unsound. We have words that are homophones, for example, right? Like pray. We have the P-R-E-Y and we have the P-R-A-Y. But that mean two totally different things, don't they? But we say the word pray in the context of our own intention. Let's say I want to pray today. But the universe responds to the sound prey and the original intention of it, which could be two different things, two different sounds. One of them being the prey that is a predator, that is the subject of a predator, correct? Right? So these homophones, they bring in kind of a static and an inconsistency that makes the language that we speak a little bit problematic when it comes down to intentionality. Other examples, flower, right? See. I'm going to see something, or I'm going to the sea. The word buy. The word sell. The word mean. The word morning. We say good morning every day. Morning is also what we do after somebody dies. This becomes very significant, everybody, when we're using words like this for certain intentions, and those intentions are inconsistent. Think about it. If we're saying these words with the intent of meaning for one thing, but they're also meaning something very different in a different context, that same sound sends a mixed signal to the universe. So we also have these subordinates, which I can't even say the word. Maybe that's on purpose. I don't know. But the subordinates are words that, when spelled backwards, they create different meanings as well. So take a word like gums, right? Backwards, the word gums is smug. Or more importantly, maybe take a word like love, and backwards, love is evil, right? So I don't know about you, but it seems kind of strange that love spelled backwards is evil. Well, maybe, I'm getting at the conspiracy realm here. But you have to take this into consideration when you see this pattern occurring a lot over time in English, and it doesn't happen in other languages. So you have this word evil, right? Maybe it's not spelled the same as evil, but E-V-O-L, which is the root word of evolution, which means to evolve, which means to progress or grow over time. So evil is progressing over time, or is it love progressing over time, right? So according to the frequencies of the word, both of them are happening at the same time. Another example is, finally, the English characters have the least amount of vowels than any other major language group. What is a vowel? Well, the vowel produces resonance in the chamber between the body of the tongue and the roof of the mouth. And English is a language mainly of non-vowel or consonant sounds. So it's spoken from the mouth, not opening. It doesn't open the throat, but it closes, and it's spoken on the tip of the tongue and from the mouth. It's not spoken from the diaphragm. The diaphragm creates those more earthy sounds and that greater resonance, doesn't it? When we hum or when we say something from the diaphragm, it creates a deeper resonance, and therefore the universe responds to it more. So lastly, we would say that the universe really doesn't respond to our language based on how it's spoken. When we take words and look at their real resonance and the etymology, sometimes it can be really enlightening, especially when we find Latin roots in English words. Take the word spirit, for example. Well, in Latin, spiritus, where the root word came from, means breath. All right, spiritus means breath, and if our definition of spirit has to do with the ethereal or the connection to God or whatnot, but there's no reference to breath whatsoever in the definition of spirit. It is only when we go through Latin that we find that definition of breath. And so that brings a certain amount of knowledge and information to us that maybe the breath is connected to our spirit in some way. Very important connection, I would say. Let's lastly take a word like synthetic, right? This is a word that probably refers to a lot of our dealings. A lot of plastic is in use with almost everything things that we even eat, things that we wear, things that we use are all synthetic. Another Latin root word. Synthetics, if we break it down, refers to sin, which means without. Thetic or theos or theology is the study of God or godly or spirituality. So we have synthetic, which means without God, if we broke down this word, right? Synthetic, syntheos, means done without God or without the belief in God. And this is the root word of plastic, a substance that we're using every day. But we don't really, like I said, the intentionality and the etymology is just not shared with us. So it's just a couple of interesting ideas there. I think that, someone could take a very conspiracy theory oriented angle towards this, and I certainly, want to veer away from that, but call it whatever it is. These are facts, right? And so we know that the words that we're using have power. Where did the meaning come from? That's the question. I think that being in Jamaica last year, I was really about 2 years ago, I guess. I was around quite a few Rastafarians, and they had a very interesting way of practicing a conscious way of speaking the English language, and of course in Papua. And it's one of the inspirations behind calling this show Innerstanding, right? Because understanding infers a position of oppression, and it's used purposely in the courts to understand something. When you understand something, you are shrinking yourself. You're putting yourself lower than the person you're talking to. Okay, so all these sorts of things that the Rastafarians do, they don't say hello, for example, right? Because hell is low and etc. and all these things. They don't say the word appreciate. They say appreciate love. Now, you could call this, kind of nuanced type of superstition if you want, whatever. It's all possible. But I think we should give credence and take a look at this. And and I'll tell you why, because this is true story right here, and you can look this up. This is the historical account of our English language that we need to start to recognize, and we need to, I think, have in our history books, along with other things. Old English, that is, English that we would not recognize, it was a tribal language, okay? Like most tribal languages from around the world, it had its basic conjugations and word endings that reflected a clear line of patterns. It evolved from human emotion and evolved from the cultural, geographic experiences of the people. It was fairly simple, tribal languages. It doesn't mean that they lacked intelligence. It just meant that they were more simple than our language would be today. This was the nature of Old English. It was altered drastically around the time of something called the Norman Conquest in England, which involved a couple of key events. One big one is that's not taught in our history books, is the distribution of a book called the Doomsday Book. It's literally called the Doomsday Book. Maybe you've heard of it. It was written after the time of William the Conqueror and the invasion of the Anglo-Saxons in England. And although they were considered a barbaric tribe by some standards, it wasn't the Anglo-Saxons that altered the language of English, but seemingly these architects of control or powerful entities that may have distributed this book, this text, in the wake of the Anglo conquest, whoever they were, right? I have some theories, and I'm not, we don't have to go down that route, but whoever they were, whatever they represented, wherever they came from, they created a frequency grid upon which a new language was forming, and that language would be spoken around the world. It is the language that's being spread around the world as English today, American English. And that its first channel, of course, was the British Empire. And the British Empire grew from this frequency grid. And all the resources that were taken, be it slaves or natural resources or whatever it was taken from around the world, would literally filter in through that grid and build that empire. Now, before all this took place, this Doomsday Book that was sent out to all the different shires of England, they were like counties. It had many functions, but one of them was to ban Latin. It banned the Latin language. And it shunned the use of Latin and Greek, which only a small minority of educated people spoke, especially in Northwestern Europe at that time, or read it. But it provided also new words for people to use who were illiterate, as well as a tax system on their possessions, which also included a measurement system, which we use today. Pounds, ounces, right? Nobody else in the world uses this system of measurement, as you know. This was all part of the Doomsday Text. I don't know why they called it the Doomsday Text, but that alone rang a little bit of an alarm for me. So most people at this time couldn't read this book, but they soon learned it because the book was free and readily available, unlike most, beside the Bible. And one needed to know it to understand where their money was going, how they were being taxed. So that was the motivation for learning it. It also spoke to the specific laws and practices that were shunned or banned, and one of those was herbalism, or what they called witchery at the time, in the form of speaking ancient tongues or ancient ceremony. And by the way, the writings of Michael Tsarian have provided me with some of this. If you're interested in Tsarian's writing, I can give you his name. He did a lot of research. He's an Irish author who did a ton of research in this esoteric history of English. Anyway, the book also provided allusions to the Bible that were never before seen. It interpreted peoples and actions and associated them with certain ungodly characteristics. For example, it introduced new words such as demon. And if you look at the word demon, if you sound it out, also look at it, what does it look like? It looks like D-man, D-E-M-A-N, demon, right? In patois, if you will, or the man. So very strange things. I'm not saying that we can make one conclusion or another, but interesting things that this book introduced, especially when it comes down to new words that were not formulated naturally through the evolution of a typical language. Michael Tsarian gives about 25 examples of these words. One of them includes K-I-L-L. I don't even want to say the word. Okay, it's another one that was introduced. So as you can imagine, most of them are negative, but when you look up the etymology of some of these words, it'll report that their origin is from Middle English. And Middle English is what was introduced at the time of this Doomsday Book, around what we call the Dark Ages, right? Probably no coincidence. Now, interesting enough, this is where things get really interesting. About 500 years later, getting into about the 1500s now, an attempt was made to make English into a real language, okay, to move away from the doomsday stuff, because apparently word got out, or certain people knew. And this shift to English as an art form, as a science, with a language with intentionality, was made by an individual or a group, maybe, depending on what you believe, that we call Shakespeare, right? And so Shakespeare's writings, whether they were writings from the Rosicrucians or other occult group of the time, whoever he was, William Shakespeare himself, had an effect of waking people up from the prescribed doomsday language, the Middle English that had been instituted since the Dark Ages. It was an attempt to bring England into the Enlightenment, if you will. That's why, even though Shakespearean language or Victorian language sounds so strange and difficult to speak, it has a certain eloquence to it, right? So it wasn't the doing of the Anglo-Saxons, and I don't want to label. I don't want people to think that this is some sort of anti-rant of anybody. It wasn't the Anglo-Saxons that I don't believe manipulated English into more of a programming system. It seems it was done in secret and by a very small and very powerful oligarchy that would later establish the British currency, and and companies like the East India Company that traded slaves, and the Hudson Bay Company that became the most powerful first corporations on this planet. We'll leave it at that. Okay, but the point is that Middle English, unlike a language like Sanskrit, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum, has a low density vibration. We're speaking it every day. I'm speaking it right now, putting low density vibes, sacrificing myself for the sake of the show, and ranting in Middle English so that people can understand me. But it's a language that perhaps intentionally or unintentionally is keeping us at a low resonance, everybody. I'll say it. It's keeping us at a low resonance. Those of you that speak even the Portuguese or Italian or anything, you realize that when you drop into English, it's like, it's like a big womp womp. You know, when you get used to speaking your own mother tongue or something else that you've learned, and then you have to switch back into English. It's a real kind of kink, and it literally makes you cringe to have to make the sounds of the English language. So just want to stop right there. Can anyone relate to this? Can anyone kind of speak on this? Anyone want to dispute it or ask any questions? All right. I probably lost everybody in that resonance. I knew it would be risky to dive into, but I feel like, it's very relevant. And I'm sure some of you agree. But let me kind of tail off here, and let's finish on a more positive note and move away from our slang, our English slang. English is just a very fascinating subject, really. So I hope at least whether you resonate with what I'm saying or whether it inspires you in some way to look into it or not, I'm sure you can agree that etymology is really an interesting area. Now, I brought up the use of Sanskrit, which is where we're going with our next segment and into our next show. Sanskrit was created as well, but with a total different intention to it. Okay, Sanskrit did not evolve geographically and culturally like other tribal languages, although it's thousands of years old. It was created with a very, very different intention. The intentionality and the exact science that's reflected in Sanskrit creates a higher frequency for those who use it, and this is actually documented. Perhaps more than creating it, the purpose of Sanskrit and those creators made the sounds of Sanskrit from the observations that they had of nature, the sounds of the animals, the sounds of the thunder, the sounds of the rain, the leaves, the sounds of the elements. And they observed the effects those sounds had on the human body and the human mind. These weren't just your average run-of-the-mill, everyday individuals. These people were known as the rishis. The ancient rishis in India were masters. They were monks, if you will, and ascetics. And they dedicated and devoted their lives to raising their own frequency and raising awareness in others to prepare us for this dark age that was to come, that we're right smack dab in the middle of, if you will. So Sanskrit was channeled from nature through the rishis. And phonetically, it expresses 49 letters, right? 7 times 7. So it's mathematically very sound. And I might add, 35 of those letters are vowels. 35 of them. Not like the 6 or 7 that we have in English. So Sanskrit creates that resonance in the cavity of the mouth, as we were talking about earlier, in that chamber. Joseph Campbell called Sanskrit the great spiritual language of the world, and he studied it as a Western professor. The number one piece of evidence that we have that Sanskrit it has this resonance is that it's actually sung in the form of mantra. It's hum. It's not spoken as I'm speaking right now. It would be hum like this and bring different sounds from the diaphragm, etc. So that's how Sanskrit would be spoken. Also, we know that the rishis that created it lived in the Himalayas. I mean, they were, they legend has it. Obviously, I don't have any proof of this, but they could supposedly live for hundreds of years and barely eat. And they're the ones that created yoga, the original creators of yoga. The language of the body, if you will, was from the rishis. All of it with the intent of raising the human frequency. So I'm glad we had them around at some point, right? I'm glad these individuals were around, and that's going to kind of wrap things up for the day, but it's going to segue into our next week show, which we're going to focus on Sanskrit. We're going to focus on mantra and the healing powers that Sanskrit hold in the various mantras that can be used for certain healing in the body and mind. I'm going to leave you with one today, since you roughed it with me and you stuck around for the whole of the historical lesson with the Anglo-Saxons. I want to pass on a very, very powerful and beautiful mantra, very simple as well, that you could begin chanting. And of course, chanting a mantra involves breathing down deep into the diaphragm, slowly, very relaxed. You can start a mantra maybe after 5 or 10 minutes of meditation, when the body is very relaxed and the thoracic cavity is very relaxed. So you inhale through the nose and then you say the mantra, you let it hum out. And so this mantra I want to pass on to you literally means I am. I am. And that, brethren and sistren, is a very powerful place to start. Establishing your own existence and aligning yourself with Creator by saying I am is a wonderful place to start. The mantra for I am is going to be so, S-O, hum, H-A-M. So you're literally saying the sounds so, hum. And you hum those sounds and you draw them out and you create that kind of full exhale when you say those 2 syllables. All right? A typical exhale for me right now, I'm putting a whole sentence in one exhale as I speak the English language. But when we speak the mantra, when we speak the Sanskrit, you're making just those 2 sounds throughout the whole exhale. So this is a great affirmation for you if you're looking to heal, if you're looking to rebirth yourself, if you're looking for energy or alignment or guidance. Because it teaches that you're teaching yourself to be present and to align yourself with God. Who is God? God is I am, right? It just is. And so we'll end it with that simple thought, that simple notion. So you can even say it to yourself to allow it to resonate on the unconscious level while you meditate. Inhale so, exhale some. Exhale hum, if you want to say it to yourself. But if you want to say it out loud, obviously say it on the exhale. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed the show today. I appreciate all of you who stuck around and even just chimed in and out today. I wanted to give you any opportunity for any final questions or comments. I know we kind of went off the rails a little bit into the mysticism, into the esoteric, but maybe you learned something today, or you can look something up that was interesting and gave you some inspiration. Anybody have anything to finish off with or to report out there in the universe, in the universe? Go ahead. All right. I'm already looking forward to next week where we talk about mantras a little bit. And feel free to pass on any questions that you'd like or anything that you want to get in touch with me about. You can send an email at techseca23, seca23@gmail.com. You can also go to my website, ericbiseca.com, if you're interested in learning more. I wish everyone a great, beautiful week with a lot of high resonance and great frequencies. A big metaphysical hug to all of you. And this will be the conclusion of the show. Look forward to Forrest Nance's program next at 6 o'clock here on the Grown Folks Network. And you all be well. Thank you.